Good morning, friends. So at the moment in church, we're talking about love, romance, and life. I'm an expert in all of those things, so you're very fortunate. When we started talking about this last Sunday, what we said, quite truthfully, I think, was that in love, just like in life, sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. When it comes to the love game and the life game, the reason some people are winners whilst other people are losers is because some people are lucky in love, whilst others appear to be cursed with bad luck. And while we were talking about luck and love, we started working our way through a really interesting part of the Bible called the Book of Ruth. It's basically a love story that starts off in a dark place. Last Sunday we looked at one of the main characters, a lady called Naomi, who was just drowning in misfortune. Pretty much everything that could go wrong in this woman's life went wrong. She lost her husband, she lost her children, she lost her income. When we started working our way through the story last Sunday, we got the impression that if it wasn't for bad luck, this woman would have had no luck at all. And when I read her story of misfortune last Sunday, I couldn't help but think of so many people who I know who just can't seem to get a break in life. So many people who it seems just have the dice of life always loaded against them. It wasn't their fault that those things happened. It wasn't their fault that that person turned out to be that way. It wasn't their fault that things ended so acrimoniously. They could not possibly have foreseen that life would do the things that life did and make them what they are today. Losers at the game of love and life, forced to live without what we said last week was life's greatest prize, the maddening, agonizing, exhilarating euphoria of loving and being loved, of knowing and being known. And whenever I think about people like that and hear their sad stories, I wish for them that their luck would turn. And with that turning in mind, let's pay our attention to this morning's Bible lesson. We'll pick up where we left off last Sunday, the book of Ruth, chapter 1 and verse 19, where the storyteller tells us that the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. So you'll remember from last week that these two women, the older Naomi and her young daughter-in-law Ruth, have been going through a rough patch. This has been a year in which they have both been bereaved. They've completely ran out of luck. They're running out of money and they're running low on hope. And so in a bedraggled state, they arrive in the village of Bethlehem that the older Naomi had left 10 years previously. And in stark contrast to the thus far dark mood in the story, their return causes a fair bit of excitement. Bethlehem was, as you can imagine, a small village. Everyone knew everyone else. And so notice, please, that when this woman comes home, we're told that the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" In other words, when this woman walks into the town that she left 10 years ago, the atmosphere becomes decidedly carnival. The scene in this sentence is a particularly happy one. And there is nothing worse than being an unhappy person in a happy environment. Perhaps you know how this feels. You're at some event or other and everyone else is in a cheerful mood and you just can't fake it. The sound of happiness around you rings hollow in your love-starved, broke, depressed ears. In this sentence, Naomi is in a soundproof prison of her own pain. She just cannot hear the happiness that's all around her. And so when all the people in the village say, break out the bunting, let's have a party, Naomi has come back, she says, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara instead. Now what you have here is a play on words. In the culture of the ancient Hebrews, the name of a person was closely associated with the character of a person. And so for that reason, when you were giving your newborn child a name, you would always pick a name that you would hope would define their life somehow. So if you wanted your son to be successful, you would pick a name that meant success. If you wanted your daughter to be wealthy, you would pick a name that meant wealthy. The name Naomi that her parents chose for her years and years earlier means happiness, pleasant, beautiful name. What else do we wish for our children? More than anything else, we want them to be happy, to enjoy their journey through this world. However, now, with a decade of heartache and loss under her belt, Naomi feels that her happy name makes a mockery of her unhappy life. And so she says to her friends, no, 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 no. Don't you dare call me that. Give me a new name instead. How about you call me Mara, which means bitter, resentful. Call me that, because I'm telling you, that's closer to the life I've lived. And you can get why she feels this way walking into this village she left 10 years earlier, right? When she walks into this village, what does she see? She sees the play park where she once pushed her now dead children on swings. She sees the restaurant where she once had dinner with her now dead husband every Friday night. This is a village full of memories, memories of a time she used to be much happier and now isn't. Now, when you lose in love and in life, you inevitably take stock of the things that went wrong. It is only natural that you would wish to retrace your steps. And in so doing, you might blame yourself for the mistakes that you made, and you might equally curse the bad luck that you've had. And in those sorry moments, you always, at the end of your wondering, ask why. Why this happened to you, why the events of your life took you to such an unhappy conclusion. This woman comes to a place where she says, here's my answer to where I'm at right now. Just call me bitter. Because, look where she goes with it, the Almighty has made my life bitter. I went away from this village full. I went away from this village with a husband and with sons. But the Lord has brought me back empty. So why call me happy? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Now this is interesting and this is dirty. Listen to this. When she calls God the Almighty, she's talking about God in a very, very, very old, early Bible way. If you lived at the beginning of the Bible story and you spoke about, quote unquote, the Almighty, you were speaking about God as the distributor of fate. These people believed that God was at the apex of everything, with his fingers firmly upon the strings of life, loading the dice of chance according to his mysterious and loving purpose. And because that is what Naomi believes, and it is all she can believe, she has no choice but to say of herself and of her bad luck, it was God's fault. Ultimately, God did this to me. Now, if you were to tell me the sad story of the love you have lost, and the misfortune you have been forced to endure, and of the successive problems that have so ruined your life, I'd never talk to you in that way. Not a chance. I'd be happy to talk to you about bad luck. I'd be happy to utter meaningless and unhelpful banalities like, what are you going to do? That's life. These things happen. Who knows why? I'd be perfectly happy to blame God directly for the good stuff in your life. I'd have no problem doing that. So if you, in describing, for example, your love life, described yourself as blessed, I'd nod in ready agreement. But not the bad stuff. That stuff I always want to distance from the God in whom I believe. And perhaps in doing that, I do God a disservice. Maybe I want to think well of a God who is far more frowning than we wish him to be. Naomi's worldview allows her no such luxury. She has no choice but to lay the blame of her misfortune at God's feet. Why do bad things happen to good people? Naomi would say, ask God. He's in charge. And it could be argued that to talk about God in such a dark way is not only honest, it is also helpful. Think about it. A frowning providence is still a providence nonetheless. And if there is a God who is to blame for everything, then that must mean that everything has a purpose. And if that is so, it is to imply some form of divine agenda that at the end of the day, we assume must be good eventually. Which of course when you're drowning in bad luck you can't see. So notice please that this sentence is packed with me's, my's and I's. The Almighty has made my life bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Those of you who've experienced such things will know there is no emptiness like the emptiness of lost love. There is no emptiness like the emptiness of a companionless bed. No emptiness like the emptiness of an empty chair. Those of you who've gone through those things in love and loss will know the pathos of this sentence. Why call me happy? The Lord has done this. The Almighty has brought misfortune to me. All I see now is the me's and the I's and the my's of my situation. And listen, when you lose in life and when you lose in love, the pain that you feel in that loss is total. It is entirely absorbing. We all understand that. When we lose love, the craving we have for love's narcotic becomes intense. Remember that time when you were rejected or divorced and you went on your 15th dud date and you wondered if you'd ever find love? Or 6 months after your partner passed and every morning for a second, just for a second, it didn't happen and then it hits you again that it did? When you were going through that heartache was your only reality, wasn't it? It was the only thing that was real. It was the only thing that you felt. It was all you thought about. It locked you up in a prison of loss and loneliness. But look at what she says in this sentence with an eye not for how she feels, but with an eye for the facts. In this sentence, she says she has come back to Bethlehem empty. Is that actually true? For sure, she's lost. She's lost her husband, she's lost her children, she's lost everything. But is she, in fact, alone? As readers of the story, we know that standing silently beside her is her young daughter-in-law, Ruth. And if it is true, as she feels, that God is to blame for her pain, then it must also be true that God has a plan for her future. And as readers of the story, we wonder at this point what that plan might be and whether it will involve a turning of bad luck. Next sentence. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Now that's interesting. They arrived hungry, just in time for harvest. Maybe the old saying is true. Maybe the only sure thing about luck is that eventually it turns. And maybe in its turning we see the invisible hand of a God who loves us and who has our best in mind. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know it does no harm to think that it is. It does no harm to think that behind the seemingly frowns of God's providence, God is working with a smile on his face for our better. And so with that turning luck, we read the next sentence with a knowing and a hopeful eyebrow raised. We read that Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So at this point in the story, we have in Ruth a young widow who is on the lookout for love. The story doesn't actually say that, but it's a fair guess. Her first marriage is over, and now she's living without love, which is a state in which she ought not to remain a day longer than she has to. Remember, we said last week, at least from a scientific perspective, love is not a pleasant addition to the life we live. It is more than that. We need love. It is a necessity. Our craving to give and to receive it is innate. It is integral to our humanity. So as readers of the story, sensitive as we are to the human condition, we see this young woman through practical eyes. Of course we are sorry for all the things she has gone through. Of course we are. Of course we're sorry she's been unlucky in love and in life. And so we wish for her, human as we are, that she'll find those things in the arms of another. And then, wouldn't you know it, coincidentally, we're introduced to what the writer says is a man of standing. Now, when the Hebrew writer talks about a man of standing, you know what he means. He's a man, he's good, he's decent, and he's loaded. Oh yeah, this is all right. So at this point we're in one of those novels, right? There's a young beautiful widow and there's a young rich guy. Back to the action. Next sentence. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favour." The Hebrew writers are full of nuance. Let me explain what they're saying here. Here we have Ruth, a young woman who has thus far been unlucky in love and in life. And she doesn't even pause to unpack her bags. She just arrives in a new town and immediately says, "I'm going out. I'm going out. I'm going out." I like this. Because sometimes in love, just like in life, you just need to go out. To go out. Pardon the crudeness, but if your life is rubbish, staying glued to the sofa and watching reruns of Days of Our Lives isn't going to unrubbish your situation. It's just going to lock you in a prison of your present rubbishness. And to fix it, you just need to get up and move it and do what this girl does and go out. Happiness loves movement. Love loves movement. Success loves movement. Just saying. Now what she wants to get up and go out and do, notice, is pick up leftover grain in the fields. So what's happening here is the story is taking place during harvest season. And in the ancient world, obviously, harvesting was done by hand. And when you do things by hand, you make mistakes and you drop stuff. And the convention in the ancient world was that the stuff you dropped had to stay on the floor. You weren't allowed to pick it up. because when you dropped it, that immediately became food for the poor. And so the poor people in the village, the older people, the people who didn't have land of their own or whatever, were allowed to follow behind the farmers and pick up the stuff that they dropped. This actually is a law in the Bible. Let's have a look at what it says. I think I included that. Yeah, here we go. So it's from the book of Leviticus, quirky part of the Bible. Bunch of rules. This rule says, do not go over your vineyard a second time. Do not pick up grapes that have fallen. Leave them. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner, for I am the Lord your God. This is ancient world social care. Okay, so Ruth, arriving in this new village, does a quick stock take of how her life is going. And she says, you know what? It's not going well. Not going to lie to you. I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have a job. And I'm broke. My life is a mess right now. So I may as well go out and do something. And pick up leftovers at the farm. Now, when you've been unlucky in love, when you've been unlucky in life, I get, as you do, that sometimes it's hard to just get up and do something. Sometimes it's hard to see a future with a happier version of you in it. And that makes it so difficult to just get up off your metaphorical sofa, because you just can't see the point. But ask yourself this: if you're in a bad place, if your dumb luck and even dumber decisions have taken a toll on your love and on your life, is there any point in do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Is it not obvious that inertia is always your number one enemy? The old proverb, I think, is true. Your lucky day is the day you decide to do something in life. That's your lucky day. Your lucky day is the day you decide to get up and move it and improve your situation, whatever it is. That's true in love, it's true in life, it's true in health, it's true in business. It's true in all of the things that really matter in this short time we have. If you want something from this life, you have to get up and go out and get it and make it happen. Only in the rarest of circumstances does it come to you. Next sentence, so she went out. She entered a field and she began to glean behind the harvesters. So notice the way, please, that the writer of this sentence overloads it with verbs. She went out, she entered, she gleaned. She went out, she entered, she gleaned. It's just a sequence of verbs. And I'm sorry, I feel so preachy going on about this, and I'm sorry about that. But that is what we all need in this life. More verbs. More doing, less complaining. More action, less whinging. It doesn't just happen. Getting the love you want, getting the life you want, getting the whatever you want always involves you. Getting up off your forlorn backside and going out, whatever that may be, it always involves you doing something. That no one's going to give things to you. You have to get them. That's your lucky day. And in this story, the old cliche seems to be true. It seems that the harder Ruth was willing to work, the luckier she became. What do you know? Next sentence. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz from the clan of Elimelech, the loaded young guy we mentioned earlier. Do you notice that phrase, as it turned out? As it happened. In the ancient world, the agricultural landscape was a patchwork of fields. And one field was divided by another just by a rock in the ground. So all around the villages of Bethlehem, there was just like field upon field upon field, and there were no fences, there were no hedges, there was nothing, there was just rocks in the ground. Thousands of them. And so what this writer is saying is, hey, you know what? As soon as this young lady got up and went out, she started to get lucky. As soon as she started to do something with her life, her luck started to turn. And in 1,000 fields belonging to 1,000 men, 999 of them were losers. She, wouldn't you know it, ended up in the field of the richest young bachelor in the village. Was it luck or did she engineer it? Does it matter? Does it matter? Next sentence. Just then, wink wink, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. Now this is important. This is challenging and confrontational. Listen to this. He greeted the harvesters. The Lord be with you. Now this is a Bible geek detail, but it's worth pausing on, because in Jewish culture, the normal greeting from one to another is, anyone know? Shalom. From the ancient world to the modern, this is how Jews greet one another. Shalom. Shalom. It's a beautiful greeting. It means something like, may peace and health and wholeness and prosperity be on you. I love it. Peace be on you, prosperity be on you, wholeness be on you. Shalom. But during the harvest, while people were up off their sofas doing something, the traditional greeting switches from shalom to the Lord be with you. And the idea behind this switch in greeting is to remind the people that while they're out there in the fields doing something, working, God is there with them in their activity. And I think that detail matters because here is Ruth, and to put it in the most crude terms, she is a woman on the prowl for a better life, and rightly so. And in that activity of hers, we are told, the Lord is with you. This begs the question, would the Lord have been with her had she stayed back home stuck on the sofa watching reruns of Days of Our Lives, whinging about her life, complaining about her situation? From a theological perspective, I gotta say, I don't think so. I think this greeting, the Lord is with you, only applies when you're doing something. I think this greeting only applies when you get up and you move it and you're doing something about something about something. It doesn't apply to laziness. The Lord is not with you in that context. I don't think that's the system. In the Bible, we get this two sides of the coin thing about life. On the one side of the coin, there is stuff that is God's to do. There's stuff about our life that's God's. And I don't know about God's stuff. I don't do God's stuff. I'm not responsible for God's stuff. That's God's thing, not my thing. But on the other side of the coin, there's stuff that's mine to do. And God's not going to do it for me. And it seems in the Bible that these two sides of the coin work together. And so here's the theology in this greeting. As you get up and you move it and you go out and you do something, the Lord is with you. The Lord is with you. Even if it's, what's she doing? Picking up leftovers? The Lord is with you. So anyway, this rich young landowner's arrived to see how things are going, and he sees something that catches his eye. And so he asks his foreman, who does that young woman belong to? Question, what is it that catches his eye? Put yourself in his shoes. You're a young, rich, unattached gentleman. What is it about a young, beautiful woman that catches your eye? Are you picking up on the innuendo? I think what you have in this scene is a seeing and a wanting to be seen. At this point, the foreman says, he tells Boaz about an earlier conversation. He says, she's the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said to me, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. Stop on that sentence. She said, please let me gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. That, in our urban world, is a meaningless collection of gobbledygook words. We have no idea what this is on about and we don't care. We glaze over when we read words like gleaning and sheaves and harvesters. I can't even fake an interest in this verse at this point. For me, this detail might be a contender for most boring verse in the Bible, but if you were there when Ruth first spoke those words, you would have been offended at her audacity, at how unladylike she is in saying this. Because the social convention is that if you are poor, you follow behind. And you follow behind and you pick up the leftovers, because that's all you're getting. Leftovers from behind. Apparently, Ruth has had enough of leftovers. She's been here less than half a day and she's seen what some people are getting and she's saying, no, I'm not making do with this. I want that. No more leftovers for me. No more following behind. I want to work among the sheaves where the good stuff is. I want to help myself to whatever it is I want from this life. And then he says, this woman, I don't know what to tell you. There's no stopping her. She came to the field and she has remained here. He just sighed when he said remained. You know that? She's remained here from morning till now. She just took a short rest and that was it. In other words, dude, this woman's not going home till she gets what she came for. I tried to get rid of her, but she just will not leave. Now, as you've read through the story, even in this sentence, you've noticed that the writer's careful to point out that Ruth the Moabite comes from Moab. She's from Moab, that's why he calls her a Moabite, because she's from Moab. Did you pick up on the repeated sort of racist undertone there? The reason for that is because to his Iron Age audience, Moabite women had a reputation akin to those from, the Trogberand Islands or something like that. They were women of easy leisure, if I can put it like that. So what do you have here? You have a young, attractive woman stuck in a bad place, determined to get out of it. She is unquestionably brazen, brash. She knows what she wants from this world, and she is unashamed to ask for it. She's gone through her share of bad luck, and she's done with it. She's done with it. And so she's decided to make her own luck. And she's willing to take a risk. There's a lesson in that. Sometimes you do. And having done so, next sentence, bingo. The rich young man says to her, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field. Don't go from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the fields where the men are harvesting. Follow along after the women. I've told the men not to lay a hand on you. Why would they lay a hand on her? Because she's a Moabite from Moab. That's how it works. And whenever you are thirsty, go get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. In other words, you have access to the water cooler now. You've got a job. Well done. You came here with nothing, you're leaving with a job. What's in it for him? What's in it for her? A woman who is out for love and a better life and who is willing to aggressively pursue those things. A man who has an eye for an attractive woman. When we read these Bible stories, it matters to understand that they are full of real people who lived real lives just like you and I do. They had real virtues, real needs, real motives, real kindnesses and real darknesses. And so Ruth in this story is what, so far? She is enviably faithful. The way she conducted herself last week, her morality and decency and loyalty are dialed all the way up to 10. This is a good, good woman. But she is also manipulative and aggressive, and dare I say, very much a woman on the make. And her complex story is like our complex story, I suppose. In the world of love and life, we are similarly jumbled. And in all of the complexity, it is entirely theologically proper to say to you and to me, may the Lord be with us. Did you just yawn and with you? That's awesome. You yawned it, they didn't even say it. Like there's stuff going on, right? And we are in the same person, good and bad, moral and immoral. What did the reformers say? We are simuli justus et peccator, similarly justified and sinful. And in all of that jumbling and in all of that complexity, as we get up and as we move it and as we try and push through and get up and rise further, may the Lord be with you in your doing, thank you, and in your striving. Get up off that metaphorical sofa, will you? That has us so stuck and so afraid. There are no answers there. None. God bless you in all you've got to go through this week. And may He be with you.